everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast with me, your host, Emma Dunwoody. I'm a qualified master coach and human behaviour specialist, as well as being a qualified human design coach. And I work with clients every single day to answer the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? I also assist them to transition from the person they think they should be to the person they really are on the inside. I teach people how to actually live their design instead of just knowing it. And if this is something that you want to do too, well, stay tuned or reach out for private coaching or Human Design Unpacks, where I show you exactly how to live your design. Hey, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Human Design Podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share something really amazing with you. And it's actually one of our new Millions of Millionaires sponsors. So to introduce this body graph chart software that we've been using that's been mind-blowing. So I want to welcome the amazing Taylor Jyson, who is my incredible operations manager. Welcome along, Taylor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. This is actually something that we implemented when?
April.
Yeah.
And this year.
We were just trialing it out because they'd reached out to us in regards to sponsoring the podcast or something like that, wasn't it? And so it kind of wasn't even on our radar, and we tried it out and we had such low expectations. And then what happened?
Well, I remember sending you a message going, Emma, why are we not using this? Because I was mind blown. You know, we get a lot of requests for stuff like that. And, you know, there's new softwares all the time. And I clicked on it, like you said, with very low expectations. And I started looking through what they can do. And I got so excited. You know, the MG in me was like, oh my God, we have to use this. And I saw the potential of it. And it has delivered more than expected. It's really awesome.
Amazing. Now, before we get into the actual numbers, because I know numbers with Taylor is a thing in our business. She loves to share all the numbers. Let's just tell the listeners exactly who it's for and what it is.
Yeah, so it's a great tool for anyone who uses human design in their business. So if you're a human design reader, a human design coach, or just someone who uses human design in your business, if you incorporate it into whatever you do, it's a way for you to embed an actual human design chart tool into your website. So, you know, if you want someone to get their human design chart, you probably send them to an outside platform somewhere, go to this website, put in your details and get your chart, whatever that platform might be. There's a couple big ones. And what's cool about this is that it allows you to put that tool on your own website and it's yours. So when someone comes and, puts their information into your website, they get their chart, and then you can hook it up to your email list, to your newsletter. You can have it linked to your own content. You can customize the reports afterwards that they get, so it's your own descriptions of what, this type is or this profile. So that's kind of what it is.
Oh my God, I love it. And it's so cool because I actually remember when Jenna Zoe, because it must be the same software that Jenna Zoe used and before anyone else. Yeah, right. And I was always like, wow, her chart looks so beautiful and it's on her website. That's so cool. So yeah, when we started using it, I was like, this is beautiful. I'm really excited that we can do it. But let's talk hard numbers. Like we have had some serious success with this, just adding this to our business. So tell everyone a little bit about the growth that we've experienced through using this.
Yeah. So since implementing it into our website in April, there have been over 4,000 people that have downloaded their chart through the website. And that's unique. That's not, someone who does it twice, because a lot of people, they'll go back because they won't download the PDF or something, or they lost it or misplaced it. That's unique chart downloads. So it's even more for people doing it twice. And it's been really amazing. It's more than tripled the size of the email list. And, you can set up sequences afterwards for people to, give them more information and keep everything in-house.
Yeah. And because one of the really big things for us is obviously human design made simple. So it gives us the opportunity to give our way of teaching human design directly to the people who want it. And I love that. I love that every single person that wants to get their chart, that downloads it, we can then support them on their journey straight away, which is, of course, what you set up, because you're amazing, to make sure that not only do they get their chart, but they also get this support, free content support that helps them as they're new to human design and on their journey. So beautiful. So how do people access this? What's it called? And I know that there's a benefit for listeners of the podcast.
Yes. So you can go to the link in the show notes, or you can go to bodygraphchart.com. And they have been kind enough to give the listeners of the Human Design Podcast a 50% off discount for 12 months, which is huge because it's already inexpensive to begin with. And then the 50% discount is going to put it at $25 a month. That's in US dollars. So wherever you are in the world, it'll be, a little bit different, but 50% off for 12 months. And the code is Human Design Podcast. And we'll put that in the show notes too for everyone. And one of the other things I want to say that's really cool about this chart tool is that it's 100% customizable, and it actually gives Chiron and the 4 arrows, which is what a lot of chart tools don't do that. So that's one thing that a lot of people are drawn to when they go to get our chart from our website is, I can get the arrows because of it, or my Chiron gates.
I love that. It's so cool. So check out the show notes, people. Get on it, because really it is such a powerful and, as Taylor says, inexpensive tool. Like, it paid for itself in the first 2 days, I seem to remember, or first day, I seem to remember. So it's so valuable, and it gives you the opportunity to really build your brand and your communication with your clients. So thank you. Go check it out. Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. I am so excited to share today's guest with you because many of you have heard me reference this human so many times in my journey to, in fact, really this podcast. And we're just about to clock over 1 million downloads. So again, thank you, everyone. We're super excited. In fact, by the time this goes to air, we will have way surpassed 1 million downloads. So thank you, everyone. And you know that story that I tell all the time about how I had this insight in the shower about changing the name of my podcast. And then the next day, as the good little MG that I am, I didn't act on it. And then the next day, a mentor said to me, someone should really do a good human design podcast about this. Well, this is the guy. Joe Pane, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Em. Thanks for having me.
I love it. I loved it. And I think even you recently sat on one of the Line 6 panel in HDX, and you told a story about this guy who you were making a decision to change career, and you kind of knew what you wanted to do, and you had this conversation with this person, and all he said was like, just do it, Joe, or something along those lines. And as you were telling that story, I'm like, that's just freaky, because that's exactly the story. And you said at the time, I wonder if he knows. Like, I'd really like to find him and tell him, like, that comment changed my life. And it was that moment that I'm like, hey, Joe, you changed my life. So thank you. And I feel really cool that we get to share this conversation now. Now, can you introduce yourself to the listeners? Can you tell everyone a little bit about your journey to becoming Joe Pane today and what you do?
Yeah, so been running my own coaching and training business now full-time for the last 16 years. 26 years married. We've got 2 beautiful boys, twin boys, 14, Oliver and Nicholas, and my wife, Sylv. We've just moved to Noosa here in the Sunshine Coast of Queensland. Once they just moved just over a year ago, which has been massive. Way back, got a background in psychology and sociology, and I worked as a rehab counsellor at Ford Motor Company over in Melbourne for a couple of years, which was a time that I didn't enjoy at all because it was very political and very agenda-driven by multiple sources, and wasn't a real job at all. It was a very political job. So I left that in much confusion. And, a colleague of mine who I was working, another rehab counsellor who was working, literally he sat beside me in the office, shared how he had this amazing experience with this real estate agent who sold his house for him and found a house for him. And this particular fellow was following a certain philosophy of, how they do their business. Sparked my curiosity. Long and the short of it is I went through a process and got qualified to work in the space of real estate in sales for 7 years. I did that for 7 years, rather. The first 5 years were just fantastic. In the last 2 years, I started noticing that I was becoming sort of disengaged. It was probably the first significant experience of feeling lost, not having any clarity of direction or anything like that at all. And then from there, I met a friend of my wife, Sylvan's friend, Lainey, who had come back from this residential retreat where she was absolutely like on top of the world, to say the extreme least. And then through talking with her, she put me onto these guys who ran this meditation training business. And this is the first time in years that I had experienced genuine excitement from the inside. And then I took some time off. And the story that you mentioned at the very beginning is that we had a mentor who was working in-house at the real estate office, who noticed I was disengaged and all that kind of thing. And he came and spoke to me privately, and I told him about this thing, that this meditation training and the residential retreats and what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and work with these people, even though they had no job going. And all he said to me was, well, why don't you just go and give it a go for 6 months and see what happens? And if it doesn't work out, you can always be accepted back here. I mean, the relationship with the work environment is really strong. So with that employer was really strong. So, and that was the simple line that gave me that permission to go and give this other world a go. And it was a very different world. So I went on sabbatical for 15 months. I did vision quests, silent retreats, countless, residential weekends, experienced everything under the sun, the whole spectrum of emotion, which at times was also ironically very confusing, and many, many times was very, very enlightening. It was incredible. And then Silvana and I were running out of money because I wasn't earning any money for 15 months. And so I got accepted back into my old job. And of course I didn't belong there anymore. No reflection of the people. The people are beautiful.
No, you were the one who grew.
Yeah, I changed. And so then I came across this whole concept. This was an advertisement in a magazine I was reading that promoted the possibility of having your own personal development business in the coaching space. And I thought, wow. So it was a diploma of coaching. I got accepted into that program. And in February 2006, I started my full-time hoo-ha into this space. And what that's culminated to over the 16 years is the work I do these days in the emotional fitness space. So the emotional fitness formula, which is the essence of my work right now. That's what it's been for so many years. And now we've put together a framework around that. It's now a full-blown accreditation program. There's a magazine, there's a book coming out on it, all that kind of thing. It's been a remarkable journey into this kind of clarity, and the mission of the work now is pretty direct, and that is to help people who, like me, have been lost and don't really know which way to go, to help them gain the clarity that they need with certain aspects of their mind, so they can they can get back onto the right road.
Yeah, I love that. And for those of you playing along at home, Joe is a 4/6 pure generator. And did you hear how he said, one friend and then the next friend and then the next friend, like that line 4, all, guiding you on this journey. I want to ask, do you remember how old, well, you will remember, how old were you roughly when you went on the sabbatical, or the sabbatical sort of ended?
Yeah, I was 33.
Of course, right? So we're talking about a line 6, you did feel sort of lost. You didn't know what was going on, lots of trial and error up until that age where it starts to integrate between 30 and 50. I think that's so cool. And it's really, fun being able to see this evolution, because of course you were part of the team that I went through training with, just quietly. I feel like it was, you carried them all, I'm sure. And watching that whole evolve into your own brand, your own voice, all of those things, I think is really, really cool to see. The other thing that I love about, I just want to help the people at home, because a lot of my community have been talking about and reaching out about the Incarnation Cross that you have. You've got the Incarnation Cross of Tension, it's called. And there's 2 particular gates in this cross that everyone, one's the fighter and one's about the provocateur, right? And there's so many people out there in the human design world saying, you're just designed you're not going to have a really great life because you're just designed to fight and provoke with people. And one of the things I'm saying over and over again is like, that's not true. It's not true at all. It's like we have a shadow expression and we have a high expression. And because of, I've been witness to sort of a chunk of your journey, and I'm not going to get into details or anything. I think one of the things that I think is so beautiful about the human that I see in you is that it's not about provoking or fight. It's about what's the bigger mission. There's that higher part of you, and whether it's that line 6, that's the visionary energy that wants to sort of really see the world in a different way, or it's that, well, there's fight in you, but fight doesn't mean that you have to be the person that's constantly poking the bear or arguing for the sake of arguing. It's that energy that fights for something greater. And when you were talking about your 15-month sabbatical, I'm curious, like, did that feel like you were fighting for something greater, like your own sanity, your heart? Like, what did that feel like?
Yeah, it was definitely about my own sanity, that's for sure. So the confusing thing was, before the sabbatical, was that, for 5 of those 7 years, which is what I call in my work, the ambition-driven world, very egocentric, competitively driven. You know how well you're doing only in the context of comparison to others externally. For 5 of those 7 years, it was phenomenal. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the ambition-driven world, especially if you're loving it and you're having a great time, which I was. And I was thoroughly loving all the material, rewards and all that kind of stuff. Where it became really dark and daunting, and again, this is nothing to do with the ambition-driven world. It was just that what happens is we move into what I call the meaning-driven world. Our values evolve, we evolve. And what happened was, all the things that used to excite me began to not excite me anymore. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a slow burn over a year or two. And I got to a point where I thought, what's wrong? Why? So the 15-month sabbatical was based on doing work on spiritual and emotional development. It was basically about putting myself on the right road to going home. But as I've since discovered, it's impossible to not be on the right road to home. Like, every road to home is going to be the right road, right? Just some roads are more arduous, some roads are a little bit more complex and longer, whereas this road that I was on with the sabbatical was more direct. And to home, I mean, to wake up to letting go of our clinginess to experience. The work that I do with emotional fitness, this is going to sound, the risk of being misunderstood here, is I don't actually care about the world as such, because what I care about is how you and I, or anyone listening, navigates all of the inevitable uncertainties in the world, and to get the maximum joy out of the appreciation of the fact that we just exist, that have joy in the fact that we exist, and the fact that we exist to have this wonderful experience. It's not about saving the world and and all that. It's about enjoy the experience that your spirit is on. The body is the vehicle, the spirit is the driver, and the ego really is in the back seat, just coming along for the ride. That's a metaphor I actually got from the fellow who was the creator of human design. I got that straight out of the human design book, where he actually says that the spirit is the one that's driving the car. The ego is actually a passenger. And sometimes the ego will try to tell the car, or try to tell the driver, hey, listen, we need to go down this road here. And the soul just ignores it and says, no, you don't know what you're talking about. We're going down this path. I'm ad-libbing here big time. But it's having faith in following that. So in my work, I refer to that as following your emotional compass, which leads you to your deepest desires, and it gives you clarity on what your standards of behavior need to be. So to me, this whole journey, human design, EFF, we call it EFF, the emotional fitness formula. We just say EFF, saves us repeating emotional fitness formula all the time, is about finding joy in the fact that you exist, and to maximize your experience of this rarity. As the Buddha said, it's extremely rare for consciousness to experience itself as a human being, let alone a human being that is looking to awake. So when I say the road to home, it's the road back to where we actually came from. And it's not about saving the world. It's not about doing this, doing that. You can apply yourself to any cause in the world. If it gives you meaning and joy and fulfillment, go for it. But I've never been one to chase a cause, because for me, it's more about, well, I guess I am on a cause, but the cause is not something out there. It's a cause of helping anyone who is lost to just redefine themselves, their identity, to understand what life stage they're at, which is great work from yourself and human design, what you guys do. And it's just phenomenal if you work out in context of my life, where am I? And that's not in terms of age, it's more in terms of your development. And then it's having an appreciation of how it is that we all contribute to the manufacture and fabrication of our emotions and how we can change that. And also to develop or create a perspective that's clean and healthy. And a clean and healthy perspective is a perspective that has got the capacity to give you instant access to gratitude and appreciation. So you have all that. The man or the woman on the journey can handle anything that life throws at them. So really, it's about the experience, and that's the essence of the work. It's not about changing the world as such.
I love that, because it's basically, like when we're on our spiritual journey, the further we go, the higher we go, we get to this point where we're like, oh, there is no such thing as good, bad, right or wrong. It doesn't matter. Like nothing actually matters. It's just, it comes down to that choice. And I feel like that is something that when we start to really embody that, like, oh, hang on a second, that's where I have control. I have control of the internal world. Like I get to choose the meanings that I attribute. And then that's what I'm creating externally. But before I even head down that road, let's just come back to the basics. Like first and foremost, what is emotional fitness? What do you define emotional fitness as, and why do we need it?
Yeah, love it. Thanks for asking. So emotional fitness is measured by the quality of our relationship with uncertainty. So
I love that.
Yeah, thank you. The single most important relationship that we can have is not necessarily with a person. It's actually with our mind. And inside our mind are all of these complex correlations of ideas, and we make this mean that and this means that. And it's all an interpretation of what we're perceiving in our experience. So to simplify all that, emotional fitness is about, well, what's your correlation? What do you correlate uncertainty with? Most people correlate uncertainty with fear. And that's one of the reasons why they have the issues that they might have, right? Compared to when you're looking at nature, as I look out this window in the beautiful trees, nature shows us that uncertainty actually correlates with growth. That uncertainty is the precursor, the prerequisite, the fundamental requirement for growth to happen. And so without uncertainty, the irony is that we would actually die. And so the essence of the emotional fitness work is to change the way we view uncertainty through all these different ways of doing it, so we can navigate anything that life throws at us. So the purpose of the work is not to make uncertainty easier, because then it wouldn't be uncertainty, right? It's to empower us to be able to navigate it with clarity and navigate it well, so we don't get traumatized by it or get stuck in it. And so that's the essence of it. And I guess another way of looking at it is emotional fitness is also about the art of letting go. Ultimately, we have to let go of everything. So.
Yeah. One of my favorite books, Letting Go. I always remember whenever we were in live classes with you, you would come for the beginning of the class and you would have some book that you were reading. You're like, I just have to read you this bit. Like, I still love it. So good. I love what you said, because I would say that one of the, if I had to give like 3 tips to my definition of success, being uncomfortable with uncertainty would have to be in that top 3, and through the frame of human design, what I've discovered is when we're talking about uncertainty, it's really about trusting self, trusting the universe. It's trusting the things that we don't know, and having more belief in what we feel maybe, or belief in ourselves, or belief that not knowing the details is actually serving us more than knowing the details. And often I talk about this through that frame of like, well, there's a lot of talk about this thing, quantum leaping these days. So how do we quantum leap? Well, to quantum leap, we have to stop squashing the quantum possibilities. And when we're really comfortable with uncertainty and we kind of know where we want to go, and perhaps we have this governing belief, which is, I think is another one I picked up from training, is like the universe will only deliver me and something that I can handle. Then that means that the way we get to this place could be any road, right? Because we already know that we can handle whatever comes our way. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. In my way of thinking, I don't think you can get comfortable with uncertainty, because otherwise it wouldn't be uncertainty. So you've got to experience the nature of the uncertainty. It's just about having clarity about navigating it well. That's the essence of it. The other part, in terms of the way things are is that, it's if whatever uncertainty is thrown your way, challenge, whatever issue is thrown your way, whether your ego believes it or not, you've got that situation because you can handle it. If you couldn't handle it, you wouldn't notice it. It wouldn't cross your path. It wouldn't cross your purview of life. So anything that comes our way, it's designed, in essence, it's designed to boost our growth. It really is. And that's why one of my sayings in life is that if you don't squeeze life, it will squeeze you. So, if you become a conscious inviter of uncertainty into your life, then life has very little reason to bring it forward, because life knows that without uncertainty, you're going to stop growing. And if you stop growing, growth is a perpetual need of the human condition. So without growth, you're going to die, whether you're dying literally or whether your skills are dying, your relationships dying, your career's dying, your opportunities are dying, or you're growing in all those areas. It's a conscious choice.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. And it reminds me of a character in my favorite book, which is The Alchemist. And the main character goes to work in the crystal shop, and the owner of the crystal shop literally says that because he didn't chase his dreams are now dead. Like there is no more purpose for him. So I love that. So how can people really learn to start navigating uncertainty? Because as you said, and in my experience, most people are like dead set afraid of uncertainty. Their ego, their mind is trying so hard to control their external reality because they're lacking that internal certainty. So if someone's out there listening to this, like how can they start to get, build a better relationship with uncertainty?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's so many different sort of roads that we can take to answer that question. So I'll go with the most direct route. And that is that within us, there's also another requirement, right, to handle uncertainty. And that is that we need to also have a strong base of security, safety, comfort. The basic Maslow hierarchy, psychology, where we need to have our base needs met, and fundamentally with Maslow's hierarchy, of course, and I love Abraham Maslow because he was all about, becoming awake and a self-realized human being. So that's a whole other conversation. But his base needs were, of course, survival, meaning to have food and shelter taken care of. So for most of us here, if not all of us, that's a given. We don't have to consciously think about where's my next bed, where's my next meal. We don't have to think about that. Well, hopefully you don't. So given that that's a given, there are other certainties, there are other ways to ignite. That's not the right word, but I'll use it for now. It's one that you've got to have an array of ways to ignite. There's another word that's better, your certainty. How you do that is through a whole bunch of different ways. One of the ways is to actually allow yourself to discover a hobby that actually sings to your soul, something that is independent of your life, independent of your marriage or your business or your family or whatever it is that your life situation is, something that you do purely for yourself, whether it's a musical hobby, a creative hobby, a physical hobby, a spiritual hobby, an intellectual hobby, whatever floats your boat. So for me, it's physical. I get a lot of meaning, a lot of fulfillment from running. I've done marathons and and I love running. I've been running for 30 years. And so that becomes a vehicle, a behavioral, psychological vehicle that brings me lots of joy, sure, but it brings me lots of comfort, safety, familiarity, security. So back in 2006, when I went from being an employee all my life, and suddenly there was lots of uncertainty in my life because I started my own business and I had no idea where the next dollar was coming from. That was a very, very grossly unfamiliar place to be in. And so what allowed me to remain focused in the wobbly stage of uncertainty when you don't know what's going on is that, 5 times a week, and specifically twice a week out of those 5 times, I had a running group to go to. I had something in my life that was a constant. I had something in my life that I could lean on, something that was familiar. So that ignited or turned on certainty. And that allowed me to be able to handle more of the unknown because I had that as a go-to. Another way of igniting certainty in your life is to have somebody in your life, a relationship where you can be unedited, unfiltered, raw, completely open, and not be judged. In other words, you can say the most inappropriate of things to get it off your chest, and the other person's there loving you and caring for you and not not judging you. So you need to have a relationship that you can lean on, whether it's a wife, a husband, a best girlfriend, best mate, close inner circle person. That's really important, because when I reverse engineer my mind around, how did I get started in 2006 and why is it that I didn't fold? Because a lot of people fold when they start their first businesses, is that I had certainty was turned on in different parts. It was turned on through my running. It was turned on through my marriage. And I was fortunate enough, and still am fortunate enough, to have a best mate that I can also talk to. And there was a community that I was part of. So we had these bases, these psychological bases of relationship, hobby. I haven't even spoken about routines, resourceful routines that take care of you, whatever those routines are, meditation routines, walking routines, whatever those routines are that turn your soul on. You've got all these bases covered. You've taken care of the psychological base need of certainty, which sits above shelter, food, etc. So now that you've got that taken care of, you've got a platform. And now you can try different things. You can go out and, with all the stuff that I had to do, which I've never done before, networking, meet new people and, doing talks and, my God, all that stuff that whenever I got downtrodden or confidence takes a hit, because it does when you go into the uncertain space and you're trying something new, it's inevitable that you're going to take some hits. So, but to have the base of my wife, my best mate, my running community, my coaching community, all these people made a massive difference. But if you don't have that platform set in your life, you're going to unsustainably, you can't sustain the uncertainty going on in your life, if that makes sense. So that's one way of doing it.
Oh my God, I love that. And I feel like there's so many people listening to this podcast that, they're either thinking about or they're already transitioning out of some sort of corporate role into their own business. And I love that. And I'm just was reflecting as you were talking about it. And when I was training, doing my master coach program, I was so conscious of exactly those things. And my certainty definitely came from, my community within there and the routines that I created. And I think that I love hearing this. And for everyone out there listening, like, this is so spot on, because if you're experiencing too much uncertainty, that's what's hard. It's not that the business is hard or getting outside of your comfort zone is hard. It's like balancing that. Okay, well, where can I find that certainty and that sort of.
Well, that's why people procrastinate, Emma, because what happens is, if I don't have those bases, if I don't have my need for certainty met, my brain's going to look for it in unresourceful ways. So, for example, if I'm starting my own business and I'm out there doing my thing and I've had a bad day and I want to fold, I want to quit, this is too hard, whatever, what I'll do the next day is I might procrastinate the whole day by spending 5.5 hours cleaning this desk, which should take only 6 minutes, because me cleaning the desk for 6 hours gives me certainty. It gives me comfort. It gives me something I can control. It's my mind saying, let's recalibrate the osmotic balance between uncertainty and certainty. So if we're not doing it consciously and resourcefully, we will sabotage ourselves through procrastination. So procrastination is one, or we actually do what I just said. We sabotage the other end where, here I am, I've made my phone calls today and I've been doing all my things and it's been a horrible day. So, I'm going to go and eat some chocolate. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as it doesn't become something that takes over your life, right? So, and then the next day I'll go out and have another go, but I'll sabotage it so it disappears so I can get back to the normal, whatever that is, the familiar. So really procrastination and sabotage, two of the most common problems out there, is a reflection, it's feedback that you haven't yet found realms of how to ignite certainty in your life in a resourceful way so you can handle more of the unknown.
Oh, I love that. And I love always, like, it's almost like having a conscious code, this is what I always talk about, certain words give us that conscious code. And like when we're procrastinating, okay, cool. Now I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that certainty and I'm finding it in a really unresourceful way and I can choose to do it differently. I love that. So given that I kind of went into the whole, there's lots of people transitioning into their own businesses listening to this. Yeah. What advice would you give people that are and it maybe doesn't even have to be business, but obviously when people come to work with you, they must be in some point in their life where they're like, well, shit, I can't do this anymore. I need to change. So what are some things that people can actually start to focus on just in their everyday life? Obviously, they're going to create this certainty, but with building emotional fitness, what are they looking for? Like, how do they know that they have emotional fitness when uncertainty turns up? Because it's still uncomfortable. So what's the difference between it being uncomfortable and a good thing and uncomfortable and a not so good thing?
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer it from a macro big picture sort of view. And then if we want to go into certain details and specifics, we certainly can. So with emotional fitness, this is now when I talk about emotional fitness, I'm talking about my framework and what my philosophy is, right? So there are 5 core focus points, okay? The first one is identity. And what we need to understand about identity is having a conscious awareness of how we are defining ourselves. So if I'm defined by my career, I'm going to be at the risk of being very vulnerable in a not such a great way, in that if my career is threatened, that translates psychologically to I am threatened. So how we define ourselves is really important. And in the work, I talk about Jungian psychology. I speak about Carl Jung. He talks about how identity, all of us are on a 4-stage journey when it comes to identity. You know, I'll do this very, very briefly because there's a lot of detail in it. But basically what happens is when we're in those sort of teenage years going into our 20s, we're in what's called the archetypical stage of identity of the athlete. So we've defined ourselves, we've hung our shingle, we've hung our identity hat on our bodies. So what do you think of my body? What do you think of my image? What do you think of my car? What do you think of my house? What do you think of my theme? What do you think of this? It's all very external, materially driven. Nothing wrong with that. It's the stage of development. And so here, the people who are at this stage of their identity development are very, very, like self-esteem is so super low because you're swinging from one end to the other. Oh, Emma loves my clothes. Oh, Emma doesn't like my car. It's like, so my identity is being out there going like that. And then what happens is as we grow, not necessarily older in age, but as we grow psychologically more mature, we become psychologically more mature, our responsibilities in life expand. We meet someone, we get engaged, or we go into a long-term relationship. We enter into a sales contract because we buy a house, or we enter into another agreement. We have a rental agreement. We have financial obligations that are more than just a week, they're long-term. We have adulthood and all that sort of stuff. And we then transition into what's called the warrior archetype, according to Jung, which is where now our core focus is about building. Get the girl, get the guy, get the experience, get the skill, get the knowledge. It's a building phase. And so this is where a lot of people are. And these 2 phases are what I call in my work the ambition-driven world, still very egocentric. The people who I get to come along, well, people come along to emotional fitness, and people who are also that you attract are people who are looking to walk through the revolving door into the meaning-driven world, because the meaning-driven world is heart-centric. And we enter into the 3rd phase of our identity development. And that's what Jung referred to as the statesperson. He actually called it the statesman, but statesperson, stateswoman, call it whatever you want. And here the focus point changes. We move from what do you think of me physically to what can I get in terms of my skill and my experience. That transforms into what can I give? So what am I here to actually provide? I'm now more of a contribution-based psychology rather than the building-based psychology. And then the one that we're curious, they're psychological stages. The 4th stage is not psychological. It's an existential identity. And that's the 4th stage is what Jung referred to as spirit, where it's consciousness itself. It's call it the soul, call it the ethereal, call it the invisible, call it whatever you want. It's the consciousness it's actually life itself. Here, in the psychological phases, we believe that we have a life and we're experiencing life, whereas in the spirit stage, we realize that we are life. That who we are physically is so far removed from the truth that it's a joke. Yeah. And so there's a whole conversation around that, which we haven't got time to get into here. But these phases, so what happens is when you understand that you're moving toward the heart-centric, meaning-driven world, it's a revolving door. It's not a door that just opens and closes, because it's not simple. It's not like you just walk in and the door shuts behind you and you're safe. Now you're in this fulfilling, joyous, meaning-driven world. No, the revolving door, and this is the thing I want to say to your beautiful people, is that we have flashes of insight. We have flashes of inspiration. We have flashes of, oh, that's how it could be. We have flashes of, maybe that's where my soul sings. We have flashes of, maybe that's my contribution. Maybe that's what I'm good at, and keep revolving around. And then comes the reality of life. Got to pay the bills, got to pay the rates, got to pay the mortgage, I've got to take the kids to school, I've got to do this. That's back in the ambition-driven world. And then we get caught up there again. It's like, oh my God, how do I get there? And so it's an evolutionary step that happens organically. And so what happens is, if you're in a job that you're disengaged with, but you've got something like an eye on a prize in the meaning-driven world, which could be, I'll just make it up based on my experience. Well, it's not made up, that's the real experience for me, is that it could be, or maybe I could help people through coaching or help people through human design. Maybe I could become a human design, practitioner or an EFF practitioner or whatever it is, right? Because maybe that's my realm of how I can actually get into this other world, because you need to also build the financial bridge, right?
Yeah.
Because to stay in the meaning-driven world, you have to integrate ambition into meaning. And so success now is completely redefined, because over here in the ambition-driven world, we define success by volume, speed, intensity, victory, the best, all that sort of stuff, which doesn't have any long-term fulfillment in it, because the ambition-driven world lives under the illusion that if I could just have a little bit more of this and a bit more of that, I'll be happy. And sure, you'll get happy, but it's what the Stoics refer to as hedonic happiness, where you buy a new thing, you get, oh, and then after a while you get used to that new thing. I've done that with fancy cars. Like after a while, it's like, geez, I'm out of pocket all this money for this fancy car, and I'm emotionally back to where I freaking was. Yeah. So what's that all about? Whereas the meaning-driven world is not about happiness. It's about fulfillment.
Yeah.
And that's where success is actually defined by the sweetest of words of Earl Nightingale, which is success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, which is a very elegant way of saying it's catching up with who you've become, catching up with the values that you've become. Because now that identity, that's just the one of the 5 core focus areas. I'm not going to go into the detail of all the other 4, but I'll mention the other 4 because it's important. Because inside of all that is the life stage that you're at, right? That's the second core focus point. And then embedded into that are your values, which in my work, I refer to values as our emotional compass, as I mentioned earlier, our emotional compass that leads us to our deepest desires. So it's catching up with that, because our values are evolving and changing as we go through this journey from ambition to meaning. And then we have emotional flexibility, where we become aware that emotions don't actually respond to facts, that our emotions respond to our interpretation of the facts. And then we've got perspective. So we've got identity, life stage, values, emotional flexibility, and perspective, which, we run really deep in all of those. And when you master all of those, you can handle whatever life throws at you. And it's a very long answer to a great question. I'm not even sure if I've answered it.
Oh my God, you have. And it's so good. And I think that, I'm thinking about like, how does this sort of translate to human design? And ultimately it's like its structure of, alignment, like really being in that place where, and I think values is definitely something that people don't understand, how much your values, whether you're conscious to it or not, impact your life. I remember saying to my husband Justin once that he bought a hat, let's say, I can't remember what it was a piece of clothing, and the dog chewed it. So, and like he loved it and he wore it, and then the dog chewed it and he was devastated about it. So he went and bought it, and then he didn't love it again. And he was like, that's really weird. And I'm like, well, no, maybe your values have changed. And he's like, shut up. My values have totally changed. Like, that particular thing attributes me or puts me in that group of people, and I don't want to be in that group of people anymore. So I was like, oh, wow. And this is, I think, values. I think in many cases, people try to consciously create their values. And I don't necessarily think that that's a thing that you can do. Like in my experience, I feel like they're already in you. They're programmed in you. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it's an illusion to think that you can find your values out there. I mean, that's the problem with the ambition-driven world, is that all the source of power and knowledge is out there, which it is. That's true to some degree. But your values are to be discovered inside you. books are great in the sense that they will point you in a direction. A book might give you the language to linguistically connect with that value that's within you, But like we know, a book on swimming can teach you, give you an idea of swimming, but ultimately you've got to get into the bloody pool to learn how to swim. So values are to be discovered on the inside. And I think that, there's in the work, in the value section of my work, there's a whole menu of questions that help you get clear on what those values are. For example, it could be questions like, what takes up most of your thinking most of the time? Where is it in your life that you are most organized, that you love being organized in? I mean, there's a clue there. Let's give you an example. I'm not that organized generally in my life, but there's areas in my life, 2 key areas in my life that I am organized in, and that is in my career and also in my running world. I know, it sounds ridiculous, I know where everything is, and I know the order of things. I even keep a running journal. It's all very organized. Why? Because it's important. And why is it important? Because it's a reflection of a desire that stirs in my soul, which is what desire? The desire of health and vitality. And as someone said to me a while ago, a healthy person has got many dreams. An unhealthy person has only got one dream. And I don't want to have one dream. I want to have multiple dreams, right?
Oh, my God, that's so true.
Yeah. So your values are to be discovered through the journey of experience. So that's where you got to be sharp. You got to wake up and go, okay, well, what seems to turn my soul on?
Yeah.
That's when I have this conversation with Emma about spirit and about human design and how it translates to consciousness, and that really turns me on. Well, if it turns your soul on, there's a value in there. That value could be a spiritually based value. Then it's just about coming up with some words that for you are unique to you, that describe that value to you. And so, also notice where you find the energy, the time, and the money, the things that you find energy, time, and money for. Those things are a reflection of what your desire is swirling around.
Yeah.
It's amazing how, when it comes to money, time, and energy, how people find the time and the money for the things that genuinely matter.
Yeah.
I've got someone in my family who I know has been struggling financially for years. And yet, when it comes to certain elements, certain things in life, there's always the money. The money's always there for that particular thing. I won't go into the details in case she's listening. But do you know what I mean? I giggle when I go, gee, she found money for that. Why can't she find money for this? Well, because she values that more than she values this. So
it's that evidence piece too, isn't it? This is what I always say to people, you need to pay attention to the external clues. You've got to look for the evidence in your life. I mean, I actually had my personal trainer there, a couple of sisters, and they said to me a while ago that I'm the ideal client, right? And the reason why I'm the ideal client is because I have the exact same sessions, 3 sessions every week in, week out. I'm always there. I'm always there on time. And they're like, you're the perfect client. And in that moment, I'm like, how am I the perfect client? Doesn't everyone do this? And it was that moment that I was like, oh yeah, one thing that I value, right at the top of my list, is vitality and longevity. I want to be here for a long time and a good time. So yeah, I think that this is places that we can really find in our life, and for me, I think about my business and the impact that I can have, the amount of people that I can empower while I'm on planet Earth. This is the thing that I always find the time for, but it's equally with my family. So I literally have a business that's set up around my family so that I can parent and work interchangeably. And even, traveling for work, I'm like, if I can bring my kids and my husband, then I'm bringing them along. So we can really look at our external world already, at the things that matter to us. And do you know the other piece that I think, and it goes back to something that you said earlier, but when we really identify the things that are important, that are our values, we also get, one of the big things for me is you're at a point in your life where you know what you value, and you need to be really honest with yourself. Are you willing to commit to that? Because I know in my fitness journey, let's say, because now I've gone down this road of building strength, because, I'm 47. So strength is the place. And I've done so much, cardio in my life, but I have to build this, and it's out of my comfort zone. I don't know it. I've never lifted. I've, all of these things. And my ego had all the stories not to do it. But it's no, but I know that this is the thing that makes me feel amazing. If I feel good in my meat suit, or as one of my friends calls it, meatball, that's all we are. We're just a bunch of meatballs rolling around on planet Earth, which I think is hilarious and a bit gross all at once. like then I'm a different human. So I think there's also a level of commitment to our values, right? When we identify what they are, we have to take full responsibility and turn up.
You've got to be loyal. You've got to be loyal to those values. And sometimes the loyalty is at the risk of being misunderstood from somebody who's got different values to you.
Amen to that.
Yeah, so that's really, really key. So
I love that. I want to go into that just a little bit because
Sure.
I think people, there's a lot of people out there, let's call them recovering people pleasers, that they are on this journey to transform their life and they're not willing to put up with the shit that they've put up with in the past, whether it's the way they treat themselves or the way they've taught people to treat them. And I think that that's also something that's really, really important for people to understand, that there are going to be times when you say no. There are going to be times that you have to put new boundaries in place. You're going to have to reteach people how to treat you. And in that process, that can be really uncomfortable as well, right?
Absolutely. Look, one of the most important, significant, crucial, massive gifts that you can give yourself is the gift of self-respect. So a lot of people have very low self-trust and low self-respect. They allow people, as you were saying about the boundaries, to cross the line. I was talking with someone just the other day, literally 2 weeks ago. This is a person I've known for a long time. And I discovered an aspect of this person that I didn't know existed. And that is that when, she goes to dance classes, there's certain, and the dance classes are professional classes, men and women. I'm not sure what kind of dance it is, but it's, dance. And, she said to me, I don't know how to handle the men that hold my butt while I'm dancing. It's like, what? What do you mean? She said, it happens all the time. And that's the only thing I don't like. It's like, whoa. It's really simple. You tell them to take the hand off your butt, or you will tell them out loud and you'll slap them across the face. That's what you're going to do. That's what I would say to my daughter. I don't have a daughter, but if I had a daughter, don't take this as literal advice, but that's what it is for me. But the point I'm making is I didn't realize that she had such low self-respect, because if you think about it, someone who's got a high self-respect operates at a different level and wouldn't tolerate for a microsecond someone inappropriately crossing a line, especially when it involves physical touch. So this is really important. And so self-respect begins with doing something for yourself for the sake of self.
Yeah.
You're taking those 10 minutes that in the morning to purely do something for yourself, whether it's a walk around the block or whatever it is, not for anybody else. You're not doing that 10-minute walk because you're, losing weight to please somebody else or whatever. You're doing it because you're doing it. It's the right thing for you. And so that's why at times you run the risk of being misunderstood by others when you're being loyal to your values. So self-respect is huge and a huge problem out there, really, for a lot of people. So for me, I know that, it's like the scientists, they say in science, they say that, which is all fact, and that is that everything in the universe is energy, and energy is always moving. And when it moves, it never stays still. Energy is always transforming form, changing form. It's always moving. And in science, when energy moves, it's referred to as a vibration. And the speed of that vibration is known as a frequency. And then that frequency finds other similarly resonating frequencies to dance with in the universe, in whatever form that is. Could be the form of the frequency of a radio station, tuning into a radio station that's playing classical music, if that's what you're into. It's the same. So, and there's nothing outside of this system. Everything is energy. So why am I going on about this? Because if you've got the frequency of high self-respect, you won't attract the dickheads.
100%.
The guy won't come, or the woman or whoever won't come to touch you inappropriately when your frequency is, I've got high self-respect. Because you can go too high and get into the ego land, that becomes another problem. But where it's at a level where it's healthy.
Yeah.
So
I think That's
Please.
such a great example, and this is why, a lot of people out there talk about vibration and frequency from this place of, what are you manifesting? But we create everything from our self-worth. Everything comes from how we feel about ourselves, that frequency that we can call in. And I think that that's such a beautiful way of explaining it. And I mean, I could talk to you all day about everything, but we have come to time. So can you please share with all of these amazing listeners, how can they work with you? How can they find you? Where's the podcast? Tell them all the details. We'll obviously put everything in the show notes as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, my website's just my name, joepane.com.au. And on there is links to my podcast and a link to all the things that I do. And one of them is a closed Facebook group called the Emotional Fitness Hub. But more specifically, what I would love to, as you and I discussed off air, Emma, I would love to share with everyone that as of the time of this podcast being released, mid-January, on the 2nd of February, we have the first launch in 2023 of the Emotional Fitness Formula program. So we launched this in February 2022, and it's been an amazing success with, just under 150 people joining the program. So we're launching it again for 2023. We keep the doors open for enrollment only for 7 days. And the reason why we do that is because when we get a large group of people enrolling, they then go through the series of trainings. Whereas if I get people enrolling at different times of the week all year round, it's a schmozzle.
Yeah.
So February the 2nd, we're running a free webinar. It'll be at 1 p.m. Melbourne, Sydney time. It's a free training, it's a free webinar. And in there, you'll be able to get a very, very thorough, deep understanding of what EFF is. It's only a 1 hour webinar. It goes for just an hour and 10 minutes or something. And then you're there, you can make a decision on your own in terms of whether this is something that you might want to consider hopping into, or whether it's something that, you can use for different elements of your life. And the EFF, what I love about it is that there's 2 roads. I've got people who do it for professional development reasons and personal development, and that's a certain level of the program. And then you've got people who, like yourself, are facilitators, they're coaches, consultants, they work in HR, and they want this as something they want to be accredited in this so they can facilitate it, coach it, guide it, teach it, and share it. So all of that will be explained on that webinar on Feb 2. And on my website, it'll be on there on the front page of the website at joepane.com.au.
Oh my God, so exciting. So people, if this has lit you up, you feel excited, you want to go down the rabbit hole, God, get on it. Get on the webinar and check it out. And then, let your authority decide. Joe, thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome to talk to you. And I feel like we just scratched the surface.
We have, but that's okay. It's a good introduction.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks everyone for being here. I really appreciate you. And I look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now.
And thanks for having me here, Emma.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast, or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.